Good evening, good evening, good evening. Now, tonight, my friends, we've got so much to talk about, so very much to talk about. Post-Bondi reaction, the absolute horror that uncovered on a beach where one of my very good friends in the political world was sat sunbathing 1 week before it all happened. 1 week before it all happened. So it really brought it home. My heart goes out to Australia, it really does. I cannot, for the life of me, imagine what that horror must have been like. Someone posted, by the way, in the chat before I'd started, that Darren Grimes is about as working class as David Cameron. I went to a state comprehensive. I grew up in a council house in the northeast of England. My granddad was a miner. My mother was a single parent. I'm not sure that my life trajectory thus far quite mirrors David Cameron. But, I'm happy to be proven wrong. Whatever sort of gets you leftists out of bed on a morning. How bizarre. How bizarre. But my friends, as well as talking about Bondi and the response to it, we need to talk about the trial that's going ahead with the trans children, so-called trans children, which I have pretty strong views about, to be perfectly honest with you. And I also want to talk about squirrels. Now, you might be thinking, Darren, what the hell are you going on about squirrels for? It'll all make sense in a moment, I promise. The Erasmus scheme as well. We've signed back up to the EU's Erasmus scheme, which, in my personal opinion, is nothing more than a Westminster wheeze to appease middle-class children. It benefits those who are at the top universities that want to go on a jolly to the European continent, and you won't believe the eye-watering sums that we are paying to put those kids through that process. It's grotesque, and it's all a sign of the reversal of Brexit by the back door. He's doing it so carefully, so craftily. And the reform response to so many issues. Some people are saying that the Conservatives can have a revival. I'm here to tell you exactly why that must not happen and why the Reform UK party are actually leading the pack when it comes to so many of the issues that the Tories are now championing. You don't have to look too far to realise that they are beyond hypocritical in the most sickening way imaginable. I tell you that for free. Right, okay, we've got a lot to get on with, so let's kick it off then by going back to what happened on December 14th. I think actually, my friends, that this is a sign, it's indicative of a global suicide pact that the Western world has put itself on. 15 people were slaughtered celebrating Hanukkah on Bondi Beach in Australia. This was an ISIS-inspired anti-Semitic massacre, the kind of so-called global intifada that has been allowed to ring out on the streets of the United Kingdom week after week, with precious little in the way of stopping it by the authorities. You have men waving the black flag, targeting a Hanukkah event. And this is how the leader, a Labour leader, the Labour Party in Australia, actually reacted. This is Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who got on camera and within minutes starts rambling about right-wing extremist groups. At this moment, this is what you choose to actually talk about. This is your response to a heartbroken, terrified nation. Think about this.
We take ASIO's advice very seriously. We work closely with them. We receive regular updates as well. The Director General of ASIO has warned about a range of threats, be it anti-Semitism, the rise of right-wing extremist groups as well. And we continue to work closely with our security agencies.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that part? The right-wing groups, right-wing groups, at a moment in which 15 Jews have just been killed in the name of Islamists. And where they had drawn ISIS flags on the sand, right? And this is the elites in case of emergency glass that they break every time, they smash it. We would normally retrieve a hammer. They retrieve this right-wing extremists that they can wave about, say, look, but we're also doing this. They break it every single damn time an Islamist attack happens. They do it to deflect. They do it to smudge the truth. They do it to pivot back to policing your speech in your countries across the Western world. It's not only stupid, it's both dangerous and reckless, and it puts our safety last. You compare what the craven Albanese had to say in response to that horrible act of terror to the MP in Australia, Bob Katter. And he, in my view, knows exactly what it is that the Australian public will be thinking and asking and screaming at their television sets at this Labour puppet who parrots the lines that we've all heard before with precious little in the way of action that we all keep demanding.
I want their names because we have had a tradition of toleration. These people are not tolerating us. So you won't tolerate us, we want you out of this country, right? Because this country is fed up with your, we must be nice to everybody. Well, I'm not particularly nice to people that crossed the border, invaded another country and murdered over 1,200 people. Tick the boxes. Do they have democracy? Do they have rule of law? Do they have Christianity or some similar belief system? Do they have egalitarian traditions? Do they have industrial awards? Now, if they don't tick the boxes, they don't come here. If you have anti-Australian sentiments, then get the hell out of my country.
I mean, I might as well call it a night. I might as well go home. Bob Katter has said what we're all thinking. Why are these people even in Australia? Why has the Western world, and actually much of the, I would argue, the likes of Canada, the likes of New Zealand, the likes of Australia, obviously the United Kingdom, Ireland, they'll hate me for saying that, but all of these anglicised nations have all done the same thing. They've all said that the capitulation to those who do not share our views, values and culture ought to be able to come here with untrammelled access. And what has been the repercussion? That, what we heard from Bob Katter there, is the clarity that I think the Western world is missing. And to her credit, Kemi Badenoch, I think for a Tory politician, finally said the obvious. But look at the responses. The Labour MPs, they didn't nod in agreement. They don't talk about national security. They demanded something else, which I'll show you in just a second.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for his words on anti-Semitism? What happened at Bondi Beach was an atrocity. But words of solidarity are not enough. We know the evil we face. Islamic extremism is a threat to Western civilization. It abuses our democracies and subverts our institutions. It is incompatible with British values. So it is not enough just to protect Jewish communities. We must drive Islamic extremism out of this country.
So I completely agree with that, my friends. I completely agree. So you might say, well, I wonder what the Labour response to that is, and I'll get back to what I think actually some have argued that this is a sign of a Tory revival, that the Tories are coming back as a force for good in the national conversation. I vehemently disagree with that. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, well, that's a whole different ask, isn't it? I'll get onto that in just a second. This, my friends, was the Labour response. They didn't nod on in agreement on the backbenches. They didn't talk about national security. They didn't talk about how a Bondi-style incident could happen here. They instead demanded that we fly in more from Gaza, of all places.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I associate myself with the Prime Minister's condemnation of the horrific attacks in Australia. We must be clear that anti-Semitic terrorism is always an outrage. Mr. Speaker, at Christmas time, many across our country will be thinking of Bethlehem, where the situation remains extremely difficult. The government's important scheme for students from Gaza with scholarships to study in the UK expires on the 31st of December, but a number of scholarship holders and their children have not yet been permitted to leave Gaza. If this scheme closes, these brilliant Palestinians will lose their university places and we will lose their talent. Will the Prime Minister extend the UK's existing scheme into next year to prevent this from happening?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her? And I know that Gazan students face huge challenges in taking up their places, and we're considering solutions for those yet to arrive. But I do want to be clear, I want them to be able to take up their places and continue their education in the United Kingdom. I'm proud we've also created the medical evacuation scheme for children from Gaza, and last week I met some of those who've been brought to the United Kingdom for specialist treatment in the NHS. Mr. Speaker, we continue to focus on aid into Gaza, and I'll make sure my honourable friend is kept updated on the next steps for students.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Beno.
So can I just say, right, that there is the response from the Labour Party. That is the Labour government that you have and their politicians in the background. Think about the timing here, right? While the Western world, while our Australian cousins, of which we share so much, the inheritance that we have stemming from the Magna Carta, common law, democracy, the Westminster parliamentary setup. We share so much with our Australians. And the Labour Party response to their heartbreak and anguish, reeling from an ISIS-inspired slaughter, and the Labour Party's priority is to stand up in the House of Commons during the most publicised part of the parliamentary week, Prime Minister's questions, to stand up and demand a new pathway from a conflict war zone in which Jew-killing savages have wreaked havoc, to demand those with the very same ideology are allowed to come here. Think about that. This is a performative refugees are welcome dance at a time when our security services are in the bin, when Australia is reeling, a country that shares the same king as us. And this is the Labour Party response. I will say it loud and I will say it proud. I do not want a single person from Gaza to come to this country. Gaza was handed back by the Israelis in 2005. What did they do with it? The bomb, the bullet, the tunnel, all in the name of murdering Jews. All in the name of murdering the Middle East's biggest ally to this country, to the Western world. And your response, your craven response, is to say that we need more people from Gaza to be able to come here. How dare you spit in the face of those who have been murdered under the ideology that I'm afraid far too many people in Gaza share with those that committed the atrocity on Bondi Beach. Makes me mad. Makes me mad. But that point that I mentioned there, is this a sign that the Tories are back? Kemi's speech being forthright. Well, I'm afraid I have to say, don't be fooled. And I go back to a comment that one of our viewers just said. Voswater says, Badenoch makes me puke. Her party has blood on its hands. During 14 years in power, they did the opposite of what they promised and everything to maximise the replacement and Sharia law. Now, population and all the rest of it, you know, I'm not one of those people that believes that there is some grand conspiracy, but I just think there are weak politicians. And there are weak politicians that allow these things to happen. Look at that graph. So, for every year between 1855 and 1915, more people left the UK than entered. Now, of course, after no World War II data was collected, and then we go on until the 1980s, and it starts to ramp up in the year that Tony Blair becomes Prime Minister. And then, of course, net migration hits almost 1 million in the year ending March 2023. Unprecedented levels, unprecedented people coming here. And I'm afraid, again, I'm not convinced that many of them coming here would share our views, values, and culture. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. But the left response is to say that, oh, you know, reform have been trumped by Kemi Badenoch. They did this. They were in government, by the way, when they did this. And they now wax lyrical about petrol and diesel cars as well, saying that they would reverse the ban on petrol and diesel cars. Well, I'm sorry. It was only a few years ago that they were all in government banning petrol and diesel cars, doing the very things that they now pledge to resolve, to fix. So if you are someone that believes that the Tory party is going to get back into government and all of a sudden be pro-border control, pro the actual survival of your bank balance through the destruction of the net zero agenda, well, I've got a sodden breach to sell you. I tell you that now. How could you be so naive? I certainly wouldn't be. As I say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, well, I'm the idiot here. That's the way I view it. I do not believe a single word that comes out of the Tory party. Half of them are bloody Lib Dems, metropolitan liberals. The other half may be all right, but they haven't left the sinking ship of the Titanic as it's gone down after screwing over the entire nation and sought to leave the land that it just ruined. No way, not on my watch. But the left themselves have said, and this is supporters of Jeremy Corbyn's party, but there are also supporters within the Labour Party as well, saying that the Labour Party need to actually speak out on the left of politics, because Nigel Farage is putting out the idea of an unprecedented wave of mass migration. I ask you, my friends, to look at the graph on your screen right now. Look at that graph right now. Where do you see an unprecedented wave? Is it in the years before the 1980s, when we had actually more people leaving than there were entering the country? Or is it in the modern era, i.e. the last few years, where there has been an unprecedented wave of mass migration? It's not an idea. This is gaslighting in its purest form. This is mathematical certainty that that wave happened. Look at it. There it is. This is ONS data. This isn't data from me. This is Bank of England and Office for National Statistics data. So Labour lit the fuse in 1997 and the Tories under Boris Johnson turbo boosted it. Since 2020, under a so-called Conservative government, we've seen net migration hit nearly 1 million in a year. And Boris Johnson sat there thumbs up saying Boris Boosterism would save Britain. The country has been transformed. Have you noticed the number of Deliveroo drivers on your streets, the number of Uber Eats drivers on your streets, the number of Turkish barbers, you name it. Your streets have been transformed. We can't take in Gazans. One, because I don't think any of them should come here whatsoever anyway. And two, because we've already reached breaking point. We're here. It's happened. We need to close the sodden border. So Badenoch on both immigration and petrol and diesel cars, you were in government, you had your chance. Don't lie to us anymore. But it gets me thinking about squirrels. And you might be thinking, oh, Grimesy, you've lost the plot. You've lost the plot. What are you talking about squirrels for? But imagine, my friends, imagine this. Picture the scene. We import millions of grey squirrels, right? A small percentage of those grey squirrels happen to be rabid. They want to tear your face off effectively. And we're all red squirrels, right? We're red squirrels. Any sane parks department, right, that had control over a public park would do two things. One, it would hunt out the rabid squirrels that are seeking to eat the faces of the red ones. And two, it would stop the vans or the airplanes until they could screen the grey ones coming here to cause murder and all the rest of it. But my friends, our elites don't do that, do they? And why is that? Well, it's because they've spent 20 years lecturing you, as this red squirrel does here, that all squirrels are equal. Diversity is our strength. Admitting that grey squirrels might be dangerous means that you're admitting that the gammons, many of my family, voters, people I love, respect, that actually the gammons down the pub were right all along about what was happening and would happen to Britain. They'd rather let the park burn with the squirrels, let the park burn, than let people get their faces chewed off, right? Than admit that they were wrong. So Keir Starmer stands in the playground telling us that rodent diversity is our strength, while this massacre occurs in the park there. But the problem is, right, that the elites can't stop the squirrels. So what do they do instead? Well, have a look at this. This is what's come down the tracks. They can't stop the squirrels, so they decided they need to stop you talking about the squirrels. Nick Timothy exposed a slew of the detail when it comes to the new anti-Muslim hostility law. So it's not called Islamophobia anymore because they decided that that definition was too contentious. Instead, it's anti-Muslim hostility law. It's the same thing, by the way, same thing. And this is a blasphemy law, plain and simple. If you point out that the Bondi shooters were following a potentially radicalized reading of a set of religious text, then you become criminal for prejudicial stereotyping, right? That's what it says. It says, including acts of violence, vandalism of property, and harassment and intimidation, whether physical, verbal, written, or electronically communicated, which is directed at Muslims or those preserved to be Muslim because of their religion, ethnicity, or appearance. It's also the prejudicial stereotyping and radicalization of Muslims as part of a collective group with set characteristics to stir up hatred against them. I'm not doing that. No one's doing that. But we're just pointing out that there is clearly a problem. Nick points out, as with the last definition endorsed by Labour, this dangerously aligns with concepts that the racial identity is a religious group. So Muslim is a racial identity. It's not, it's a religion. In the same way, I don't think that we're going to see Christianity blasphemy laws by the back door called anti-Christian hate come through, are we, anytime soon? That would be the same thing. The left would be up in arms saying that decrying this as complete and utter, blatant blasphemy law. Racialization is what they say within this piece. It's a nonsense term used to, in this instance, make something about race, beliefs about race, beliefs in the Prophet Muhammad, in Allah, They are beliefs. They are beliefs. That ought to be in the same way that the trans debate, trans ideology, trans skepticism is a protected philosophical belief. I believe that actually the criticism of religion ought to be too. And I say that, by the way, as a Christian, a God-fearing Christian. And Nick says activists want to elide race and religion in this way because they want to shut down scrutiny and criticism of what they believe by calling people racist. If the government signs up to this definition, ministers will be encouraging and facilitating exactly this. He says, here's an example of why this matters. In Australia, Muslims acting in the name of the Islamic State killed Jews in an anti-Semitic attack. Now read this hadith, believed to be a saying of Muhammad. Some Islamic scholars say it's inauthentic. Some say it's used to justify anti-Semitic violence. So Allah's message in English says, "The hour will not be established until you fight with the Jews. And the stone behind which a Jew will be hiding will say, 'O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me, so kill him.'" Whether it's authentic is irrelevant, says Nick. We should be free to discuss it, not least because moderates who disbelieve the hadith should be supported in doing so. So that's Muslims who disbelieve in the hadith. So ultimately, right, this is all an obvious attempt to silence speech and debate on everything from the wearing of the hijab in day-to-day life, prayer bans in schools, a whole slew of issues. You can think of so many of them, I'm sure you can, in which this would present itself as a blatant problem. And I guess the one area where we can highlight this the most would be in comedy, right? And the ambiguous nature of this law would criminalize, in my view, not just me, people like me, right? Not just politicians, not just a whole slew of other things, but actually comedy. And I thought of Ricky Gervais straight away. And Ricky Gervais, who stood up and made a joke about Muslims in the context of Boris Johnson and cats, promise, I think actually Ricky Gervais would face censorship and persecution in the United Kingdom under this law.
And people say to me, "You spoil that cat." I go, "Yeah, I do. It's a cat. It's not a person. What's the worst that can happen if you spoil a cat? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't grow up to be fucking Boris Johnson. It is." No, I don't get political. Although he is out of his depth. I mean, he started off by saying women in burqas look like post boxes. Now, it's not up to Boris Johnson what a Muslim woman wears on her face. It's up to her husband. Not my rules. Not my rules.
Now, a joke, a good joke, it made people laugh. But, you know, the shock element, oh, you can't say that in modern Britain, and the sort of laughter, the sort of nervous laughter that unveils itself on the faces of people. He would potentially be criminalized for saying that joke on stage to an audience because of the fact that it actually gets in the way of the UK government's Islamophobia definition rebranded as anti-Muslim hostility. I see this as the slippery slope to total censorship of talking about these issues, because they know that the narrative is totally against them now. The state is basically protecting the ideology of those. And I'm not saying this is all Muslims. I know for a fact that I'll be called Islamophobic and all the rest of it. It's about protecting the ideology of those who hate us while jailing the people who actually notice it and who actually call it out. And there was a clamour post-Bondi for the police to say, maybe we've got this wrong, maybe we shouldn't have allowed anti-Jew hate to become so totally ubiquitous as it has done. Well, Post-Bondi, the police have released a statement. Now, this is from the Greater Manchester Police and the Metropolitan Police in London. And the police have said that they will arrest anyone who chants globalise the Intifada in the wake of Bondi Beach. Now, globalise the Intifada has been said on the streets of Britain, primarily London, but also in Manchester and Leeds and other places too, week after week since October 7th. Week after week. Without any repercussion, right? Been allowed to happen. Now, the police have suddenly realised that acting as chaperones with handcuffs and a truncheon for weekly calls for Jew murder on our streets probably looks a bit bad. Maybe we shouldn't have done that, oh God. But my friends, where is the consistency, right? So the police are taking action here and now, but a man has just been jailed for 18 months for 2 anti-immigration tweets he made after a Christmas market car attacked, and they were only viewed 33 times, so 30 people saw them. Incitement argument, I think, is reaching, right? It's reaching. Now, do I agree with what he tweeted? Would I say that myself? No, I wouldn't. But that's besides the point. How can it be that the Globalise the Intifada mob get to say and speak without recourse and all the rest of it until actually Jews get murdered on a beach in Australia? But this man does a tweet after a Christmas market attack that was viewed just 33 times and he ends up in the slammer? Do you see what I mean? There's an inconsistency here. There's a two-tier approach to the justice system and the clamping down on the incitement and hatred in speech and debate and discourse. And then you look at Ayman Yanoussi, a Moroccan migrant, spared jail for upskirting on the tube. 4 offences, by the way, 4 offences. This is from Court News UK. 4 offences of upskirting on the tube because he claimed he didn't know it was illegal and he got off. He got off. An intemperate tweet will get you jailed. An intemperate tweet will see you in the slammer. But the state, when it comes to upskirting, they say, oh, well, you're from a different culture. You didn't know that you couldn't take a photograph up a lady's skirt of her underparts. You didn't know. It's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry. Diversity is our strength. Inshallah. That's what they basically say. And yet a man in prison for, yeah, I agree, before anyone clips this up, tweets I wouldn't make myself and I wouldn't associate myself with. But upskirting 4 times, invading a woman's privacy in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is okay as long as you're foreign and come from a Muslim country and you don't understand the culture of the nation. The state gets on bended knee for the squirrels that I mentioned earlier, while they kick your door down for an errant Facebook post, a spicy Twitter post, Lucy Connolly et al. It's a 2-tier system with its new Islamophobia law designed to keep the population silent and submissive. I see it as that. I see it as that clear as day. I'll be hauled over the coals, told I'm too controversial, told that I'm saying all the wrong things. But I don't care. It needs to be called out. This is 2-tier justice, 2-tier care in action. But my friends, while we're all worrying about these issues, and they're big, and I hope you take my sincerity in when I speak about them, while we're talking about these issues, and your local farms and all the rest of it, in County Durham, actually, we just passed a motion to say that we will endeavour as a local authority to buy local produce from farmers to help our local farms after the taxation by the Labour Party, being taxed out of existence, going after absolutely everybody that works to raise more taxes, billions of pounds more in government, in state spending. It's your money that they're spending. Well, Starmer has managed to find, despite saying we're all skint and they needed to raise taxes, they didn't need to raise taxes. The OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, said so itself. They've found 570 million quid under the sofa, under the national sofa, to give the EU for the Erasmus scheme. Now, 570 million quid, that's over £500 million. Erasmus is a state-funded free year for the European middle class. Nothing more. Nothing more. In the name of Alan Turing, the British developed, post-Brexit, the Turing scheme, in which actually it wouldn't be quite as narrow to the European continent. A declining continent, by the way. The Europeans are losing the economic war in so many ways on absolutely everything, and instead are making themselves a citadel for migrants who do not share so-called European views, values and culture. They're losing everything, and we want to focus £570 million on a declining economy, statist economy, that cannot come up with the revolutionary ideas of the future to actually grow. The European Union share of the global economy has dropped like a bloody stone. Honestly, it is unfathomable if you told people when we joined the EU that the collapse of the EU would happen quite so starkly and quite so quickly. But here we have Starmer signing up British taxpayers to underwrite EU students coming here to 2 to 1. There are more European middle class people that'll come here than there will be British students leave to do it. And when the British students do leave to do it, by the way, they are middle class Brits who can probably afford to ask mummy and daddy to let them go abroad instead. So the family farm tax and all those other things that I'm focusing on as a councillor, well, they wouldn't even cover a fifth of that bill. So we're bankrupting farmers, leading them to mass suicide to fund this kind of penchant for the European middle classes to try and appease Ursula von der Leyen of the European Commission. Your tax hikes are literally being laundered through the Treasury and sent back to Brussels. This is the Brexit reversal that Keir Starmer always wanted. He was the architect of a second referendum, always wanted to happen, clear as day, wanted to use Jeremy Corbyn as the willing patsy to get it done. He's now doing it by stealth, having won the election, convincing a minority of people that he wouldn't reverse Brexit. He always wanted to do it, man. He's a globalist human rights lawyer that loves the ECHR, loves these technocratic institutions that the European Union, in my view, epitomises. He wants us back in. He'd love now more than to be in bed with Ursula von der Leyen. Not literally, at least I don't think, but you know, everyone needs a holiday. Sorry, Victoria, that's the Prime Minister's wife. If you're watching, I'm not suggesting that your Prime Minister is indeed having an affair, but I am suggesting that he shares, I would argue, a great deal of sympathy with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. As I say, this is a Brexit reversal by stealth. Total Brexit reversal. Ron says Corbyn was no fan of the EU. Ron, you're right. Corbyn wasn't a fan of the EU, but he was guided by people like Starmer and the movements within the left to be of the view, and this shows how far the Labour Party moved away from places like this in County Durham, to being one of the globalist elite, to saying that we need to protect the European technocracy in order to protect the core tenets of the European Union. That is technocracy, statism, immigration, free movement, regulation to the hilt, and nothing, I would argue, in the British national interest. So, yeah, it's happening. This is happening. This is, I would argue, reversal of Brexit by stealth. He knows that he couldn't help when it comes to the original reversal of Brexit that he sought and the second referendum. Remember, he was the architect of that policy from Labour. They didn't win that election in 2019. Boris Johnson won it instead, got Brexit done. Would argue that until we leave the ECHR, Brexit is not done. And I say that as someone who campaigned heart and soul for it. They're doing it by stealth. They're taking us back in. It starts with Erasmus, then it'll be the customs union, which binds us from doing our own trade agreements in the national interest into actually having the EU negotiate them on our behalf. And the EU don't have our interests at heart. So why would they negotiate a good deal for Britain? They won't, but they would prefer that. It takes it off of the Labour government's plate. They don't have to deal with contentious issues like protecting British farmers. They can instead blame the EU again. This is what it is. It's the devolution of power and responsibility away from you as the voting public and in the hands of a European technocracy. It's why I hate the EU as an institution, and I never ever wish to see us join it again. And I mean that. And I'm sure many of you do too. I can't imagine there are many Europhiles in the crowd, but in case there are, there we are. I've said my piece. I've said it out clearly. Give me a like still if you are a Europhile. You never know. It might be a little kink of yours. But my friends, on another topic, Reform have signed a letter. Now, the Tories are still playing catch-up on this, on trans kids. Half of them are just bloody Lib Dems in blue ties. I mean that. But Reform knows where it stands. Stop the state-sponsored abuse of our children. And this is happening. This is a Labour trial being allowed to go ahead, despite the fact that I think Wes Street and the Health Secretary is sceptical of it. He's still allowing it to go ahead. This letter says, Dear Prime Minister, we are writing to you as 5 Reform UK Members of Parliament to demand that your government immediately halts the NHS Pathways Puberty Blocker trial, which is due to begin in the new year. This trial will expose already vulnerable children to life-changing and irreversible consequence, the full extent of which is unknown. True. Guinea pigs, using our children as guinea pigs. Children will be given powerful puberty-blocking drugs despite the absence of robust evidence on long-term physical, psychological, sexual and reproductive outcomes. So bone density and the ability for women to have children later in life, if they reverse this, which most of them do, by the way, they are the risks of puberty blockers. Using children as an experimental subject is ethically indefensible. The Pathways trial represents state-sponsored child abuse, dressed up as research, and is wholly incompatible with the NHS duty to safeguard children and do no harm. Allowing this trial to proceed allowing children as experimental subjects in this way is ethically indefensible. It places children in foreseeable risk while offering no credible justification that any potential benefit outweighs the harm. It will also risk further eroding public confidence in both the NHS and your government. Yep, damn right. Although I'm not sure what trust is left in this bloody rotten government. Reform UK is clear that on entering government, we would bring this trial to an immediate end. In light of that, there is little purpose in allowing a trial to begin which lacks ethical credibility and long-term certainty. We urge you to intervene now and stop the Pathways trial in full. Yours sincerely, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, Lee Anderson, Sarah Pochin and Danny Kruger. The Tories, right? Well, they're coming out about all of this, saying all of this. I'm going to slag them off a little bit more, but first of all, I want to see what Sarah said in the House of Commons on this issue.
Deputy Speaker, a survey published today by Transgender Trend shows overwhelming public support for non-intrusive medical approaches for under 16s with gender dysmorphia. The public want this state-sponsored child abuse stopped, so will the Secretary of State represent the will of the people stop the trial and instead introduce statutory legislation to access the evidence data from the 2,000 children and young people already given puberty blockers through the Tavistock scandal.
So the Tavistock scandal, of course, was the NHS Portland Trust clinic in which children were experimented on, and you had whistleblowers and it was actually a very good BBC report that I'll never forget for as long as I live. A BBC report from, I believe it was Panorama, and it had an expose from those who had worked at the Tavistock, in which you had Muslim parents pushing their children to become trans because they were gay. So it was quite literally trans in the gayer way. You can look this up. This is the God's honest truth, where actually children are being pushed into these treatments, so-called treatments, like guinea pigs, after only 2 sessions with a therapist. 2 sessions with a therapist, children saying, I want to be Arthur, not Martha. So there you are. You put on these treatments and in time you'll get your breasts chopped off. It's sickening to me. But the Tories have come out, the so-called moderate Tories, the Lib Demery of the Conservative Party, the upper echelons of that wing of that dead party, have come out and apologised about this, by the way, because they're terrified of the traction that we're getting and have stood for years, even since the Brexit Party, on this very issue. So they've said this.
To grow, gay or straight, male or female, the day that you are denying them the opportunity to have a normal human existence, whatever it may be, in whatever colour or shade of human life that may be, the day you are treating ordinary humanity as a medical condition to be treated, is the day that you're denying the truth. You are not prioritising those who are most in need, and you are experimenting on the most vulnerable. And that is wrong.
So he apologises there. He stands up and apologises. Well, I'm sorry, but what do you say to the 2,000 kids that were put through the NHS Tavistock clinic whilst you were in government, and now you're apologising because actually it should have always been common sense that children do not know what the rest of their life is going to be like as an adult. Young autistic gay children, for example, who may hate their bodies during puberty, but grow up to live happy, successful lives as young gay people, or people on the autistic spectrum who go on to live perfectly happy lives, no longer hating their bodies, and the change that's happening, the perfectly natural change that's happening to their bodies in puberty. That saying to them it was fine for them to be experimented on in that way. Why didn't you recognise that when you were all in government? And that's Tom Tugendhat, by the way, if I didn't say that he stood for the Tory leadership. Like the leadership, the captain of the Titanic jumping overboard and saying, does anyone else want to take our? And Tom Tugendhat said, I will. God forbid. But I want to pay today a huge tribute to the LGB Alliance, who did actually organise what you can see on this clip, protest against Labour. They took on the heat when it wasn't fashionable. They took on the heat in actually arguing that this was trans and the gay away, as I said in the Muslim example, but in other examples too, where kids don't like the fact that they're gay and think that actually a trans outcome's better than a gay outcome, and seek these interventions, so-called medical interventions, as a consequence. Well, I don't know what interpretation of progressive politics could ever allow that to happen, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, I don't get that at all. I really don't. And now I have to talk about the fact that too many politicians, you will have seen that we had the war warning by senior officials within His Majesty's government. And of course, the Ministry of Defence itself, officials actually arguing that war is imminent. And it reminded me of this tweet from Luke Akehurst MP, a Labour MP, who is the MP for North Durham, which is where I'm from, represent, born, all the rest of it. And Luke Akehurst has been speaking recently about the need for all UK residents to be ready for this fight. And he said on X, he said this. He said, patriotism is unconditional. You don't switch it off and on and off because of the politics of the government of the day. There's one Britain. It isn't Keir Starmer's or Kemi Badenoch's or Nigel Farage's. Leo Kerr says, Britain, you sound like a nationalist. I've informed the police. And Dovey says you can love Britain deeply and refuse to fight for a government that's broken public trust repeatedly. I think it's perfectly fair to argue that you wouldn't fight for a Britain that doesn't seem to be on your side. That's the problem, right? The unity that we had in wars, 2 world wars, the first and the second, the unity that was so overwhelming was because we knew that we were fighting against a cause that certainly didn't represent who we were as a country. But I'm afraid to say, quite frankly, that you can't spend 30 years dismantling our identity post-Blair through a constant attrition of our morale to tell us that what we have as Englishmen throughout the ages isn't worth a damn. That actually we need to go about the world and become some globalist entity, that we need to trash our history, tell us that the flag of St. George isn't ours, tell us that St. George himself wasn't English, tell us that, a whole slew of things that we hold dear to us aren't genuine because they were given to us by others. Despite the fact, by the way, that we have given the world democracy, we have given the world rights, we have given the world the rule of law, so much, the railways, whatever else it might be, we have been, I would argue, an overwhelming benefit to the world. You open our borders, you let people in who don't give a flying flamingo about us and our country and our views and our way of life. And then you wonder why no one wants to take a bullet for your globalist managed decline of their once great nation. I say it's pretty damn obvious to me. Do you not? I say it's pretty damn obvious why people would be questioning whether or not they want to risk their lives or see their children's lives or their grandchildren's lives risked irreparably in pursuit of the protection of Sir Keir Starmer's state. I think it just shows how far he has taken us as a country into the depths of despair, where people don't think they want to fight for king and country because they don't believe that king and country anymore is with them. That's the issue. That's the bloody issue. Right, my friends, I'm going to get through to your questions now. If you haven't got any in, smash that like button, get your comments in thick and fast because I'm going to scroll through. My goodness, you've been busy. Hello to all of you who have said hello. That was very kind of you. Joan says, nothing wrong with your background, Darren. You should be as proud of it as I am. The greatest politicians have been from such beginnings. Aneurin Bevan, for one, and he pioneered the setup of the NHS. Saul says, it's not about borders. It's about the leaders making stupid choices. Grumpy, my great friend, says, everybody has been warning about these attacks for ages now. I'm just waiting for the UK's version of Bondi Beach. It's almost certain to happen. Crag says, thank you for your fantastic work. Thank you, Crag. That's very kind. Ron says Keir is a globalist puppet. Deagle says, where is the gorgeous Chloe Dobbs gone? Well, she's on every other video on this channel, so you won't have to go far, Seagull. Stupid question. Dole says, no, the problem is the government empowering Islamic jihad causes like Palestine. If the Gov supports these Islamic causes, it means terror. Marty says, our gorgeous Darren is here instead. Marty, that's very kind, very kind. Michael says he wants Pauline Hanson from the One Nation caucus in Australia to be Prime Minister of Australia. She's a Bob Getter. Bob is a true Australian. No one says, we are locking the door after the horse has bolted. Typical government action. Voss says, Badenoch makes me want to puke. Her party has blood on its hands. During 14 years in power, they did the opposite of everything that they promised. It's true. Very true. Grumpy says, that's all they banged on about at today's Prime Minister's questions. It's like they matter more than we do to Labour, these foreigners. Yeah, I agree with that. Wayne says, on the topic of taking in more Gazans, as that Labour MP called for, there are plenty of Muslim-based countries for the injured to be taken care of in, but they don't want them. I wonder why that is. Yeah, I wonder why too, Wayne. I wonder why Egypt builds skyscraper-sized borders made of steel, barbed wire, cement to keep out the Gazans. Why is that? What is it about the Gazans that Egypt wants to keep out? What could it be? I wonder. You don't have to be a bloody brain surgeon, do you? Grumpy says, I think Labour are trying to harm our nation on purpose. It's the only conclusion I can come to. Nobody could be that stupid. I mean, yeah, you're all right. The EU is, European says the EU is broke and welcome Keir's money. Yeah, of course they do. They're laughing all the way to the bank on that Erasmus scheme. They really are. Laughing all the way to the bloody bank. Grumpy says investing in the European Union is like investing in a Betamax factory. Pointless. Starmer is reversing Brexit against the people of this nation's wishes. Aye, 17.4 million people's votes. Not a damn for that. It didn't go his way, so he doesn't like the outcome. Brazos says, I can't see us getting Pierre from France or Friedrich from Germany myself when it comes to the Erasmus student scheme migration. Ron says, Labour are dead in a few years, so I believe they're now pursuing a scorched earth strategy. Hang On says, it is the woke future in education that has created confusion in children and the wider population. Ron says, this is the long march through our institutions. Michael says, Ted Heath committed treason when he signed us up to the precursor to the European Union, the single market, the common market. Grumpy asks, who's in charge of the medicalisation trial of our children? Is it Joseph Mengele of the German, the Nazi? Hang On says, nobody asks why gender dysphoria is becoming only a thing after the woke push. Ron says, I will quote Connor Tomlinson, why would I fight for a government that is replacing me? Yeah, Stuart says it's our money, not his. I agree with you, Stuart. He's spending your money on his priorities, not on yours. That's why this rotten Labour government needs to be voted out as soon as possible. Right, my friends, I'm going to go because Newcastle United will be playing imminently, I believe. I'm not sure what time kickoff was. Actually, it might have started already. But anyway, regardless, I'm hoping it's not going to be the same outcome as the derby against Sunderland, which I was morally upset by. I'm grateful, happy for people in Sunderland, but I wasn't happy for Newcastle supporters like me. There we are. So I guess I can be as selfish as Starmer sometimes when it comes to my footy team. Thank you so much to everybody. If you didn't hit that like button, please do. It really helps this channel, an independent channel, continue to grow and flourish. I'll see you very soon indeed. Can you believe it's so close to Christmas? I've got my Christmas hat on my desk, ready for some Christmas recording. So look out for that. All right, good night, God bless, and keep your chin up. We need you in the fight. We really do. Thank you. See you soon.